is this thing you do. You probably haven't fully named it yet, but you've felt it. You meet someone, a friend, a partner, a person you've only known for 2 weeks, and something about being around them makes you feel complete, like a version of yourself you actually like. And so you keep going back. You call more than you planned. You think about them between conversations. You start needing them to be okay so that you can feel okay. And somewhere underneath all of that, without ever saying it out loud, you're hoping this person is finally going to be the one who fixes the quiet ache you carry everywhere, and then they let you down, or they leave, or they just don't give you what you were hoping for. And the ache comes back. And you think, okay, next time, here's what nobody ever tells you about that pattern. It's not about them. It never was. What you keep looking for in other people, that specific feeling, that sense of being understood, being chosen, being enough, it's not something another human being is capable of giving you. Not permanently, not in the way you actually need. And the reason you keep chasing it out there is because you never learned to find it in here. That's what this video is about. Not in a generic love yourself way. That phrase is so overused it's practically meaningless at this point. I mean something specific, a pattern, a mechanism. And when you actually see it, see how it works in your brain, in your body, in the choices you make without even realizing, it changes things. So stay with me. Let's start with something that might sound strange. The people you are most drawn to, not necessarily attracted to, just drawn to, often share a very specific quality. Something about the way they make you feel. And psychologists who study attachment have noticed something interesting. We are not randomly drawn to people. We are pulled toward people who feel familiar. Not comfortable. Familiar. There's a difference. Comfortable means easy, peaceful, low stakes. Familiar means it registers in your nervous system as something it already knows, and your nervous system learned what normal felt like very early, before you were old enough to evaluate it, before you could decide whether that normal was healthy or not. So if you grew up in an environment where love came with conditions, where you had to perform, or stay small, or manage someone else's feelings to feel safe, your nervous system wired itself around that. It started reading uncertainty as closeness. It started reading emotional distance as something to work toward. Not because you're broken, because you adapted. That's what young brains do. They take whatever is happening around them and say, this is how the world works. I will build myself around this, and then you grow up, and you carry that blueprint everywhere. And when you meet someone who feels like the blueprint, someone who's a little unavailable, someone whose approval you have to earn, someone who gives you just enough warmth that you keep trying, your nervous system lights up. Not with alarm, with recognition, with that strange pull that you might have been calling chemistry. That pull is real, but it's not telling you what you think it's telling you. Here's where it gets physical, because this isn't just an idea, you actually feel it in your body. Think about the last time you were really waiting on a text back from someone who mattered to you. Just sit with that for a second. What happened in your chest? Your shoulders? That slightly sick feeling in your stomach that isn't quite pain but isn't comfortable either. That's your nervous system in a state called threat response. Not because your life was in danger. Because your brain categorizes rejection, or even the possibility of rejection, as danger. The same circuitry that kept our ancestors alive when real predators were nearby is the same circuitry that fires when you read a message that feels colder than usual. Your brain does not know the difference between a tiger and an ambiguous text, and when that loop starts, the waiting, the analyzing, the trying to figure out what you did wrong, you're not being dramatic, you're not weak. Your brain genuinely believes that this person's approval is a survival issue, and it will keep sending you back into that loop, keep sending you toward people who trigger it, because the only thing your nervous system wants is to resolve the threat, to get the signal that you're safe, that you're chosen, that you're enough. The problem is that signal, when it finally comes, when the person calls back, when they compliment you, when they show up, only works for a little while, and then the loop starts again. And you need another hit, and another, and you start unconsciously orbiting this person, not because they're necessarily right for you, but because your nervous system has decided they hold the key to your safety. This is not love. It's not even infatuation exactly. It's displacement. You are outsourcing a job to someone who cannot actually do it. The job is this, making yourself feel like you exist in a way that matters. That sounds heavy, but let's be honest. At the core of every time you've needed someone to text back urgently, to choose you publicly, to tell you that you're not too much, what were you actually asking for? You were asking for proof. Proof that you're real. Proof that you're worth something. Proof that the parts of yourself you're most uncertain about aren't deal breakers. And other people can give you that proof. Temporarily, beautifully, sometimes for years. But they can only ever be a mirror, and a mirror doesn't create the reflection. It just bounces back what's already there, so when you desperately need the mirror, when you feel hollow without it, you're not missing the person. You're missing something inside yourself that you've never been properly taught to access. The capacity to say to yourself, without needing external confirmation, I am here, I am enough. My experience is real and valid even when no one is watching. That capacity has a name in psychology. It's called self-validation. And for a lot of people, especially overthinkers, especially sensitive people, especially people who grew up in environments that were unpredictable or emotionally confusing, it's the one thing that was never developed. Because it didn't need to be. You had to be attuned to other people's reactions to feel safe. Self-validation was a luxury you couldn't afford, until now. So why doesn't the common advice work? Because you've heard it. Just love yourself. Stop seeking validation. You don't need anyone to complete you. And every single time someone said that, part of you thought, yeah, okay, but how? And got nothing useful back. Here's why those lines fail. They treat self-validation like it's a decision. Like you can just choose it on a Tuesday afternoon and then you're done. But it's not a decision, it's a skill. And it's a skill your brain literally does not have the neural pathways for yet if you were never taught it. Telling someone who's never learned to swim that they should just stop being afraid of the water is not helpful. What they need is actual, specific instruction. And here's the other thing those lines get wrong. They imply the problem is wanting connection. It's not. Wanting connection is one of the most human things in existence. The research on loneliness and health is staggering. Isolation does real, physical damage to the body. Wanting people in your life, wanting to feel close to someone, wanting to matter to someone, none of that is the problem. The problem is a very specific type of wanting. The wanting that happens when your internal system is empty and you need someone outside of you to fill it. Because that's not connection. That's hunger mistaken for connection. Real connection happens between two people who are already, imperfectly, okay on their own. Hunger that's dressed up as connection produces something completely different. It produces relationships built on what you need from each other rather than who you actually are to each other. And those relationships, no matter how intense they feel at the start, always eventually crack under the pressure. Now here's the part that most people skip. The part about what to actually do differently. And I'm going to say up front, these are not 5 steps. They don't happen in a weekend. But they do work if you actually let yourself try them. Not perfectly, just honestly. The first thing is the hardest thing, which is why I want to talk about it carefully. It's learning to catch the moment when you're about to go external. When you're about to pick up your phone and send a message because you need reassurance, or analyze a conversation looking for clues about whether you're okay, and pause, not forever, just for one breath. And in that breath, ask yourself something specific. What am I actually looking for right now? Not from this person, from this moment. What do I need to feel? The reason this works, and I know it sounds almost too simple, is that most people who struggle with seeking external validation have never asked themselves that question. They've gone straight from feeling the discomfort to finding a way to outsource it. The pause is not about denying the need. It's about finding out what the need actually is, because often, when you get specific, it turns out the need is something you can meet yourself. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to reduce the urgency, enough to make the reaching out a choice rather than a compulsion. You might find out that what you actually need in that moment is to feel grounded, and you can ground yourself. You might find out you need to process something that's bothering you, and you can write it down. You might find out you just need to feel less alone. And that calling the person is completely fine, as long as you're calling because you want to connect, not because you need them to fix something that only you can fix. There's a difference between I want to talk to you and I need you to make me feel okay. One of those builds intimacy. The other slowly hollows it out. The second thing is almost embarrassingly practical, which means most people dismiss it, which is a shame. It's the practice of narrating your own experience to yourself. internally, not out loud, unless you really want to, in a way that's specific and kind, without requiring anyone else to confirm it, not affirmations. Not "I am worthy" repeated in a mirror until you feel something. Something more grounded than that. More like, "I'm sitting here and I feel nervous and that's real." Or, "I did something hard today and I notice I'm not going to tell anyone about it and that's actually okay." Or even just, "I'm here. This moment is happening. I'm in it." The reason this matters, and this is the part that took me a while to understand, is that a huge component of external validation seeking is not just wanting approval, it's wanting proof that your experience is real, that it happened, that it counts. And when you're used to getting that proof from outside, from someone acknowledging what you went through, responding to what you feel, confirming what you suspect about yourself, you lose the ability to give that proof to yourself. You start to feel like your experience only exists when someone else sees it, and that's a terrifying way to live, because it means you are only real when you are witnessed, the practice of narrating your own experience. Quietly, specifically, starts to rebuild the part of you that knows your inner life is real without needing someone to see it. It's a tiny thing. It sounds almost stupid in the context of the size of the problem, but it's not stupid. It's the first brick in a completely different architecture. The third thing is about relationships specifically, and this one is worth paying attention to because it changes how you pick people. When you start to get clearer on what you're actually looking for, when you start to be able to name the specific feelings you are outsourcing, you also start to notice which relationships in your life feel genuinely nourishing versus which ones feel like you're always slightly performing, always slightly managing, always slightly hoping you said the right thing. Because here's what happens when you stop needing someone to fill the empty place inside you. The people who were good for you stay. And the people who were only in your life because you were both using each other for something, maybe not consciously, but functionally, they start to drift, or you start to feel differently about them. And sometimes that's sad, but it's also incredibly clarifying. Healthy connection starts to feel different in your body than the hungry kind. It's slower, quieter, less urgent. It doesn't come with that spike of intensity where you're obsessively replaying conversations. It feels more like warmth than heat. And at first, that might actually feel boring because your nervous system was trained on the heat. It might feel like something is missing. That sensation of, "this is nice, but it doesn't feel like the thing I thought love was supposed to feel like." What you're noticing in that moment is something important. Calm feels unfamiliar, and your brain is interpreting unfamiliar as wrong. It's not wrong, it's just new. Give it time. Now, I want to be honest about something. Because I think videos like this have a habit of making it sound like once you understand the pattern, you're cured. And that's not real. Understanding it helps enormously, but you're going to have days where you completely backslide, where the old hunger comes back at full volume and you find yourself refreshing someone's social media at midnight, wondering why they haven't responded and hating yourself a little for it. That is not failure. That's old wiring doing what old wiring does. Deeply ingrained patterns do not unlearn themselves just because you've intellectually understood them. They need repetition. They need patience. They need you to be slightly less brutal to yourself than you've probably been in the past. The discomfort that comes with changing this pattern, particularly early on, is real. When you start sitting with the feeling instead of immediately outsourcing it, it gets worse before it gets better. Because you're no longer numbing it. You're actually feeling it. And it can feel like you're doing something wrong, like clearly this isn't working because I feel terrible. But you're not feeling terrible because you're doing it wrong. You're feeling terrible because you're doing it right. You're meeting the thing you've been avoiding. That always stings at first. Think about what it's like to use a muscle you haven't used in years. The soreness isn't damage, it's growth, and it passes. Not quickly, but it passes. There's one more thing I want to say, and it's the thing I think matters most. It's also the thing that most psychology content gets wrong by leaving out. Not every case of wanting from other people is self-abandonment. Some of it is just grief. Some of it is just loneliness that's real and valid and not caused by a wound. Some of it is the completely legitimate ache of being a human being who has been through something hard and wants someone to sit with them in it. You are allowed to need people. You are allowed to reach out. You are allowed to want to be comforted, celebrated, heard. That is not weakness. That is not something you need to fix. The goal is not to become so self-sufficient that you never need anyone. That's not health, that's armor. The distinction, the actual line between what's worth working on and what's just being human, is whether the needing is running you, whether you've lost the ability to feel okay inside yourself without external input, whether you're choosing people based on who they actually are or based on how effectively they fill the hole. When you have access to your own validation, when you can give yourself even some of what you've been desperately looking for outside, you don't stop wanting connection. You want it more, but differently. You want it clean. You want it mutual. You want it to add to what you already have rather than try to build something from scratch. That is the version of connection that actually holds. So here's where you are right now, even if it doesn't feel like it. You're a person who has been doing something incredibly sensible in a context where it didn't quite work. You learned to find safety in other people because at some point, that's where safety was. You learned to look outward for confirmation because inward didn't feel like a reliable source. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not fundamentally unlovable in some deep way that you've always suspected. You adapted to something real. And now you're in a different context, and the old adaptation is causing problems. And you have the capacity, not the easy ability, but the capacity to slowly, imperfectly build something different. Start with the pause. Start with the question. Start with learning what you're actually looking for before you go looking for it. And notice, even once, when you find a small version of it inside yourself, even if it's barely there, even if it feels fragile. Because that small, fragile thing is not nothing. That is the beginning of something that doesn't collapse every time someone doesn't text back. You've spent so long looking for it in other people. Maybe it's time to look somewhere closer. There's something that connects directly to what we talked about today. A pattern that happens inside relationships that makes all of this 10 times harder to untangle. If you're in something right now that feels confusing or stuck, the next video is worth watching.